Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to dive into something that I think a lot of people are curious about. It's how menopause can have an impact on relationships. And I think this is really interesting because we've got medical research, we've got cultural perspectives, we even have some personal stories. So we're ready to just kind of go deep and uncover how these changes affect not just women, but their partners as well.
Yeah, I think, it's important to remember that relationships are a two-way street. And when one partner is going through such a major life transition, like menopause, it's going to impact the other person. It just does.
I think you're right. And it's not even just about, the physical symptoms, right?
Yeah.
It's about like all of the emotional and, relational shifts.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, too, how menopause is viewed and how it's experienced can differ drastically across cultures. Like, for instance, in Mayan culture, menopause is actually celebrated. It's a time of liberation. It marks the end of certain restrictions that are tied to menstruation.
Wow. Okay, that's definitely not the narrative that we usually hear. But before we jump into those cultural differences, I think it's important for everyone to kind of be on the same page. Like what actually is menopause?
Yeah, let's start with the basics. Menopause is a natural biological process. It marks the end of a woman's menstrual cycles, and it's triggered by declining levels of hormones, estrogen and progesterone, which are produced by the ovaries.
Okay, so it's not like one day you wake up and bam, you're in menopause.
Right. Not quite. It's definitely gradual, happens over a period of several years. It's more of a spectrum, I would say, with distinct phases.
Okay, let's break down these phases then.
Yeah. So the first phase is perimenopause. This often starts when a woman is in her 40s, but of course it can happen earlier or later. And this is when you start to see those classic symptoms like hot flashes, the irregular periods, and of course, mood swings.
If you're listening, think back. Have you started to notice any of these changes? Or has your partner? I think recognizing those early signs can be key to navigating the transition together proactively.
For sure. And then comes menopause, which is defined as 12 consecutive months with no period. The average age for this is around 51 or 52, but again, there's a range.
Okay.
Postmenopause. And this phase lasts the rest of a woman's life. And while many of the more intense symptoms might lessen, there are some long-term health considerations that become more prominent.
So it's important to remember this isn't just like a temporary blip. This is a significant shift.
Yeah.
It has both short-term and long-term implications for women and their partners.
Exactly. And that's really where those cultural differences that we mentioned earlier come in. How we view and approach menopause can profoundly impact our experience and our relationships.
Okay, so let's dig into these cultural perspectives. You mentioned the Mayan example, which is super intriguing. What other cultural beliefs stand out to you?
Well, one that comes to mind is the Japanese concept of konenki, which translates to renewal years. And instead of focusing on the loss of fertility, it emphasizes a time of increased energy and spiritual growth.
So it's not just about like the physical changes, it's like a whole mindset shift. I can already see how that could shape how couples approach this stage of life.
Absolutely. And, in some indigenous cultures, postmenopausal women are revered for their wisdom and their experience, often taking on leadership roles within their communities. This kind of reframes menopause as a transition into a new phase of influence and respect rather than, a decline.
Wow. Those examples really challenge like the Western tendency to medicalize menopause and view it through this lens of deficiency.
Yeah, they do. And I think they really highlight the importance of acknowledging the diversity of experiences and perspectives.
So how do these cultural differences actually play out in relationships? Let's say you have a couple and one partner is going through menopause and the other one is struggling to understand what's happening.
Well, imagine if one partner comes from a cultural background that emphasizes those positive aspects of menopause, like the wisdom, the freedom, the new beginnings, while the other partner is being bombarded with all these messages about, aging and decline.
Oh yeah, that could create a huge disconnect in how they view the situation and how they approach it.
Exactly. It really underscores the importance of open communication and a willingness to learn from each other's perspectives.
So even though every woman's experience is unique, I think understanding these cultural influences can be a valuable starting point for couples navigating this transition together.
Absolutely. It really encourages empathy, reduces those misunderstandings, and it can even help couples appreciate the unique strengths and opportunities that this phase of life can bring.
I love that. All right, so we've talked about what menopause is, we've talked about the cultural influences, but how about the nitty-gritty? How can partners actually support each other through all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's what we're going to cover when we come back.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back. We've been talking about the cultural tapestry around menopause, but I think it's time to shift our focus to, How can partners actually support each other during this time?
Yeah, I think this is where it gets really practical for our listeners. We talked about the biology, the cultural influences, but rubber hits the road. How do we actually navigate this within a relationship?
Communication is key. And I don't just mean like casual conversations. I'm talking about deep, honest sharing about what each partner is going through, physically, emotionally, and even sexually.
I can imagine that's easier said than done, especially when you've got mood swings and, irritability in the mix. How do couples even keep those lines of communication open without it turning into an argument?
Patience and empathy. You have to remember that your partner isn't intentionally trying to be difficult. They're going through a major biological and emotional shift. Taking a deep breath, trying to see things from their perspective, that can make all the difference.
That makes me think about what you mentioned earlier about humor. Can a little laughter really help?
Oh, absolutely. Humor can be so powerful to diffuse tension, reminding each other you're in this together.
Okay, so communication, patience, empathy, and a dash of humor. Those are great starting points. But what about concrete actions? What are some practical things partners can do to support each other?
Attending doctor's appointments together. It's a fantastic way to show support. It allows the partner to learn firsthand about the medical aspects of menopause. They can ask questions and be involved in making those decisions regarding treatment options.
I imagine that makes the woman feel less alone. Like, hey, I'm here with you every step of the way.
Exactly. And it's teamwork, you know? Beyond just the doctor's office, supporting healthy lifestyle changes.
Like, what kind of changes are we talking about?
Well, regular exercise can do wonders. Alleviate hot flashes, improve mood, boost energy, even protect against those increased health risks that we talked about before.
Oh, so like hitting the gym together, going on walks or hikes, maybe even trying a dance class.
Exactly. Finding activities they enjoy doing together, making it feel like, a shared commitment.
What if one partner is like really resistant to exercise? Any tips on overcoming that?
It goes back to communication and compromise. Starting small. Finding activities that are fun, not a chore. And celebrating, each other's progress along the way.
I like that. What about diet? I know that's often mentioned with menopause.
Yeah, you're right. A balanced diet.
Yeah.
Rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean protein can help manage symptoms and just promote overall health.
So maybe partners can cook healthy meals together.
Exactly. Cooking together is a fun way to bond. Experiment with different foods. And just create a supportive environment for healthy eating.
All this talk about healthy habits makes me think about sleep, which can be tough during menopause. Hot flashes, night sweats. How can couples make sure they both get a good night's rest?
The bedroom environment is key. Cool, dark, quiet. Invest in breathable bedding. Maybe try separate blankets to reduce disturbances from night sweats.
Those are really great tips. But let's not forget about the emotional side of things. Menopause can be such an emotional roller coaster. How can partners support each other during those tougher times?
Patience and validation are really important. It's about listening without judgment, offering words of support, and just being present. If the mood swings are really severe, or depression or anxiety are issues, it's always a good idea to seek professional help, individually or as a couple.
It's okay to ask for help when you need it. There's no shame in that. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been unpacking how menopause affects not just women, but their partners as well. And, we've talked about the changes, the cultural differences, and all of the ways to communicate and support each other's well-being. But what happens after menopause?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not like everything just goes back to normal after the hot flashes and irregular periods go away.
Exactly what happens in that post-menopause phase.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that those hormonal shifts we've been talking about, particularly the decline in estrogen, have long-term effects on a woman's body.
We touched on this earlier, right? Like the increased risk of heart disease, osteoporosis, and urinary problems.
Exactly, and those risks don't just disappear. In fact, they can sometimes increase with age.
So it's about maintaining those healthy habits, like exercise, a balanced diet, and managing stress, but also, being proactive about those medical checkups and screenings.
Right. It's a more proactive approach to health, both individually and as a couple. And, this is where that open communication is so important.
Yeah, you're right. Because, as couples are aging together, they might face new challenges like health issues, changes in mobility, even caregiving.
Absolutely. And being able to talk openly and honestly to support each other's needs and make decisions together can make a huge difference.
So it sounds like postmenopause isn't just about the woman. It's about the couple and how they adapt together.
That's a great way to put it. It's about evolving as a couple, finding new ways to connect and, continuing to prioritize the relationship even as you're going through all these other changes.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
I agree. There's so much more to explore and understand about menopause and relationships. But hopefully this has given our listeners some insights and a starting point to navigate this transition with awareness, empathy, and support for each other.
I love that. And on that note, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. Knowing what we've talked about today, what are some conversations you can have with your partner to prepare for this transition together? Remember, every woman's experience is unique, but by approaching this journey with open hearts and minds, you can come out stronger and more connected than ever before. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep talking, and keep supporting each other.